Imagine being able to land a job more easily just because you and the hiring manager look alike. Imagine being able to have greater access and greater quality healthcare just because you and the doctors and the staff also look alike. Now imagine having a greater quality of life and overall a longer life expectancy than others. Only this time it's because they don't look like you. That in itself is a form of privilege. And today I'll be talking about a specific form of privilege known as white privilege. Now, according to Paul Carr in Whiteness and White Privilege of November 2016, white privilege is a significant concern within educational, political, governmental, economic, and social structures. So before I begin and dive into exactly how white privilege is a problem in our society, I will first break down exactly what white privilege is. Then I will examine the factors that contribute and lead to white privilege. And finally, I will offer hope and solution to challenging the very notion of white privilege itself. So to begin with, white privilege in itself is a reinforcer of the social inequalities that currently exist in our society. Dr. Francis Kendall, in Understanding White Privilege 2002, defines white privilege as a institutional rather than personal set of benefits granted to those of us who by race resemble the people who dominate most of the positions of power in our institutions. This essentially affects everyone regardless of whether or not one is aware that they are being affected by this invisible force known as white privilege. Being institutionalized, white privilege can contribute to economic, physiological, health, and other disparities between those who can pass off as white due to the whiteness of their skin and those who cannot, who are most often people of color. In terms of economics, J.W.B. Tucker in The Ultimate White Privilege Statistics 2020 states that the average black household net worth is only worth $6,000 compared to when you look at it from the white household, which is only $110,000. That is a huge significant difference and disparity between black households and white households. In physiological and health terms, Dr. Joseph Hobbs in White Privilege in Healthcare 2018 states that although tasked with serving all people, the system itself has a tendency to provide a set of benefits and services that meet the needs of the majority rather than finding and focusing on meeting the full needs of the minority. So now that we have gone over some of the problems that arise from white privilege, we can examine some of the factors that lead to the ongoing cycle of white privilege itself. And the very idea and notion of white privilege can be traced back to the very nature of racism itself. As mentioned before, white privilege is a set of benefits or advantages granted to us by the institution in which we were raised and socialized in. And in our case, living in the United States, the United States government is the institution that we were raised and socialized in. Another contributing factor is ignoring or being unaware of the privileges that one holds. Now this contributes to the ongoing cycle of white privilege itself, because if you have privilege and you do not acknowledge it, you are only harming people by taking away certain advantages and certain benefits from them. and most of these people are oftentimes people of color. And according to why white people downplay their own specific racial privileges, August 2015, by Carrie A. Dolan. On an individual level, white people do not recognize that privilege extends to themselves. So they continually and actively ignore that. And by doing so, they contribute to white privilege and that ongoing cycle by keeping it and passing it down from generation to generation. So now that I've painted a picture of what white privilege is and what contributes to its growing cycle, we can make a change and difference by addressing and acknowledging white privilege in a way that eliminates the negative associations and negative assumptions of people of color. Dr. Mary O'Connor in Equity 360, August 2019, states each of us can make a difference in addressing privilege. The concept is not to take away everything from people who are white or white passing, but it is to eliminate all the negatives for people of color. So one way we could do this is to incorporate more ethnic studies in public curriculum, so people and students at a young age are more exposed and immersed to other cultures than their own, and they'll be able to grow more accustomed to different cultures, and they won't experience any type of culture shock, which oftentimes may result in ethnocentric views and discriminatory views like white privilege does. Another way we could combat white privilege is using the privilege that we do have to help others. Now, we can't really take away this privilege, but we can acknowledge and use the privilege that we may have as, people of who could pass off as white due to their whiteness, and use it to help others or act out and call others out on them abusing their form of privilege. So today I was able to talk to you about the issues that arise from the concept of white privilege. We began by defining what white privilege is, and then we looked and examined at some of the factors that contribute to the ongoing cycle of white privilege. And finally, I was able to offer you some hope and solution to combating the notion of white privilege in itself. It is important to remember that change starts on an individual and local level. So it is up to you and I to acknowledge any set of privilege you or any others may have, and to use it for the good and helping others out, as making our society as equal and as just as it is intended to be.